Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. The Trump administration is waging a fierce and tragically destructive war against science and research, against American universities, against knowledge itself, in a crazed effort to achieve, I don't know what. An open letter signed by nearly 2,000 leading American scientists, including dozens of Nobel Prize winners, said that a climate of fear has descended on the American science and research community. The letter, from members of the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, noted some of the modern wonders of science. It has given us the smartphones in our pockets, the navigation systems in our cars, and life-saving medical care. We count on engineers, the letter said, when we drive across bridges and fly in airplanes. Businesses and farmers rely on science and engineering for product innovation, technological advances, and weather forecasting. Those kinds of things and so much more are jeopardized when someone can just mindlessly decide to blow up much of the proudest, most advanced, and most critical scientific efforts the world has ever seen. I'm going to talk about this sad and difficult story with my guest, Professor James Jimmy Booth, a climate expert who's a professor of Earth and Atmospheric Science at City College, the flagship of our city university system. Professor Booth, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Hi.
I appreciate it. For those of us who love learning, it's chilling to watch the hostility shown by the Trump administration to the pursuit of knowledge and expertise in this country. But I think a lot of people don't yet grasp how serious this is. So what are your thoughts on what is happening, and how alarmed are you?
So I'm trained as an atmospheric scientist, so I've been paying attention to the research on the weather forecasting side. And for us, it's been a pretty rough cut in terms of what's been suggested to be removed from the research enterprise. I think everybody agrees that Congress and the president can make decisions about how things are funded, but in terms of optimizing for weather forecasting, what they're doing is not the best approach. In terms of optimizing for the research and development that graduate students provide through the research that they do with professors, it's not the best approach. And right now, I have individual examples where people were furloughed or let go, and I think anybody who was objectively deciding how to optimize weather forecasting would have made the cuts that were made.
If the proposals, whatever's on the table right now, actually go through, if funding gets cut, what are the consequences?
Yeah, that's actually why I came today. So if somebody's watching and hasn't yet contacted their senator about the next funding bill, then I would encourage them to take a look at what's happening. In terms of direct cuts that are relevant to weather forecasting and research on atmospheric science, they would have to end multiple satellite programs that NASA co-leads with NOAA. And those satellites are critical for the data, not just that the National Weather Service uses, but also the private weather forecasting industry also uses it.
We remember what happened in the New York metropolitan area with Hurricane Sandy, and then what happens up and down the East Coast and the Gulf Coast with hurricanes and that sort of things. What are you guys looking for, and what happens if you don't have the tools to do it the way you want to?
Yeah, with hurricane storm development, we need the satellite observations, and we need the hurricane hunters, they're called, which are the airplanes that go out and fly near them as they're developing.
These are totally crazy people, but that's for,
right.
That's for another
they can
story.
Do that. But we need the data, and so today you might hear a lot about advances in AI and ML for forecasting, and that is useful. But all of those models rely on the same initial conditions that a weather forecaster relies on. Mm-hmm. And those initial conditions come from the satellite observations and the ground-based observations that are made either with flights or with ship observations. And so you take those things away, and there's no guarantee they're going to take all of them away, but if you take any of them away, the forecast becomes less good. The complication of the atmosphere is such that as much initial conditions as we can put into our numerical models and our AI models, the better they're going to work. And so then you're saying, well, where is the storm going to make landfall? When it makes landfall, how strong is it going to be in terms of its wind and in terms of its rain? Those sorts of forecasts rely on the data that we want to continue to have streaming in. And the idea, the big picture idea of, well, the forecast could be made by someone other than the government, that's okay. But the observations, all of them right now are made through government programs. And everybody in private industry that I've talked to wants them to keep going.
Right. So, and if this occurs, so then it's more difficult for local residents to prepare for what's coming. They're unsure or less sure about what's coming, but also local governments and rescue people and frontline people and that sort of thing. So it just seems, and it doesn't seem like there's a political aspect to it. I mean, I don't see that there are people on the left or on the right who are like in favor of this.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think when you look at the numbers for the weather forecasting and how much it costs the government versus what potential gains it provides and what literal gains economists have shown it provides, there's not really there's nothing in the accounting to back up the idea of removing these things. The disconnect might be that the satellite observations, those things are these long-term projects that feed into a weather forecasting network, and there's kind of a disconnect. And so part of what we want to do, and we being the atmospheric science community, is make the connection for everybody that these things that NASA is doing right now that's called Earth science are directly related to the forecasts that you're getting daily.
Right. So you mentioned Earth science, but tell us what you do and what you teach at City College.
Sure. So I am right now a statistician and a physicist and an atmospheric scientist.
Oh my goodness.
Right? My appointments at City College are in the Earth and Atmospheric Science Department, where I teach a class that's about the physics of the atmosphere. And then I also teach a class that's called Natural Hazards. And once you start doing natural hazards, you're really doing statistics. And you're looking at events that have happened in the past and how frequently they occurred. So you can talk about probabilistic future risk. And the students who take that class don't have to have any sort of background knowledge of it. I bring them in, I talk to them about the different hazards that occur going from hurricanes through earthquakes, and then I talk to them about the statistics behind studying these things. Somewhere in the middle of the class, the students realize the class is both fun and terrifying, right? Because when you talk about natural disasters,
right,
it's real life and death. And so the students enjoy the class, but they also get a sense of, okay, these are things that we need to take seriously. And it's a good reminder about what you said at the opening, which is, the science behind these things has been very helpful in preventing people from dying when things occur. There was a huge landslide in Europe recently. It buried a town in the Alps. Only one person died in that because the seismologists who were watching the activity predicted it coming and evacuated the town.
Right.
In the past, or if you don't have science, those people all die. I mean, it literally crushed the entire little river valley town.
And in the old days, long before we had anything like the weather forecasting we have now, hurricanes would hit and people without warning. I mean,
Yep.
suddenly there's a hurricane and tremendous numbers of people died.
Right.
So
I mean, I can't imagine.
It was horrible.
Yep.
So there's been a general sense of worry and anxiety for a variety of reasons because of sort of the attacks on colleges, the attacks on science, the attacks on research and that sort of thing. So among college faculty and administrators, not to mention the students themselves, there's been this sense of anxiety across the country as a result of the current atmosphere. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like, not just at City College, but across the City University community? What are the sort of the broad general concerns among faculty, administrators, and students?
Sure. Yeah, I would say the biggest concern is, since January has been related to the students thinking about when they finish, what kind of jobs are they going to get, right? And right now, the uncertainty in the economy, the uncertainty across the sciences has made it where we can't prepare them like we used to for getting into the job market. And so that's the thing I'm most talking about, because as a professor who teaches a lot of juniors and seniors, my first step with them is to say, what do you want to do after this? What do you want to do with this degree? And then how can I help you get there? And it used to be the case that I would push them in multiple different directions. And now there are very few, and it's just uncertain. It seems like it's changing week to week.
Right? Exactly.
I'm surprised right now that the issue with jobs, the people aren't making the connection between that and these policies, right? So for me, it's like, oh, okay, if economy is what everybody's voting on, let's get back to that.
Right. It's like we mentioned a couple of minutes ago. That part is not political. I mean, no one wants uncertainty. You know, if the policy is this or if the policy is that, then you know how you need to respond to it. The kids know what direction they can move on. You know, professors and administrators have a better understanding. You know, so it's the uncertainty that can be maddening.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, there's this idea that, okay, maybe the government is too big. Fine, but first figure out if these critical jobs that need to be done, if somebody else is going to manage it better, have those openings available.
Right.
Like, create that in the system. Because if you have something that's propped up and you just take out one block, what happens next, right?
Right, the entire edifice, and there's a sense of, and we hope this is not true, but there is a sense that the entire edifice is shaky and in danger of collapse.
Right.
And you know, that's not good for...
Yeah, no, and I hope not as well.
For anyone.
Right.
I think often about how the United States benefited from the exodus of scientists and artists and other brilliant people in the 1930s and lead up to World War II and during the war, and actually in the immediate aftermath of the war. There's already a so-called brain drain now in the United States. You have a lot of brilliant people who are leaving, either because they're being forced out or they don't know if they're going to be allowed to stay, or because they've decided, you know, we don't really appreciate what's going on and we're going to pack up and go elsewhere. Can you talk a little bit about the potential effects of a brain drain, or what your thoughts are about that?
Yeah. I think City College benefited directly from that historically. Like in the 20s and 30s, that was the case. And now to see the thing happen in the opposite direction, then the projection can be, based on the past, that you're just going to see less excellence here. And I mean, within the atmospheric science community, I have colleagues in Japan and in Europe, and they are right now looking to swoop in and hire recent grads, and to hire faculty, and to hire government, you know, civil servants who are getting laid off. And you know, there is, within atmospheric science, there is a global atmospheric circulation thing we're interested in, but then there's also local impacts. And if you're working in Japan, you're working on the local weather impacts there. If you're working in Zurich, you're working in the local impacts across Switzerland. And so that brain drain for us, in terms of the work I do, means less excellence for research on hazards, less excellence for research on seasonal weather forecasting prediction. It's just going to make it harder for us.
This is kind of an offbeat question. I think there are very few people who think that colleges and universities are above criticism, or who think that, you know, individual things, matters can't be improved. But what I'd like you to talk a little bit about is just college life in general, separate and apart from politics or even policy. One of the great things, it seems to me, about actually going to college is the college experience itself. This is beyond what you learn in the classroom, the work you do in the classroom, for example. The students, the professors that you meet, the activities outside the classroom, the new friends that you make. And I am concerned about what is lost if you radically upend the college experience, or if you prevent qualified young men and women from actually going to college. So I just would like you to talk for a couple of minutes about what the experience of actually going to college is and why that's so great, if it's great.
Yeah, well, I think it is great. I think the experience of going to college is different from one school to the next. I would say for anybody who happens to watch and has the opinion that college is a place where people go to hide from the workplace, should visit City College. At City College, there's very few people who live in the dorms there. Mm-hmm. They're commuting. They're probably working a part-time or full-time job.
They are not hiding from the workplace.
Maybe supporting their parents, right? And then they do get time to interact with their fellow students. And they do get to grow, not just from the classes they take, but from the maturity of getting themselves to and from classes on time, the process of figuring out, all right, what is my major? How do I do all of the work? And then we do have on-campus activities that are great, where the students get to hang out with each other. Within our department, we have a student lounge where in between classes, the students get to chat, right? They also get to learn the critical aspects of technology, and ultimately, they usually get a job that would pay them more than if they didn't go to college. And that's why City College and many schools in CUNY rank very high in this metric about the social mobility, right?
Yep.
You go and look, and it's an objective measure, and they're doing that, right? Now, on top of that, now you say, okay, well, that's City College, that's CUNY. What about other colleges? And I think across the country, what you're finding more and more these days is that within the college setting, there's a transition to helping people use technology that we have right now, and that includes things like ChatGPT, and actually utilize it to do better at whatever they're going to do. And I think the future for all of this stuff is that in a college environment, you're not just getting a training, you're getting a sense of, okay, how do I do this, but also what is right and wrong? And ultimately, like, by interacting with other people your age and kind of and figuring that out, then when you do get in the workplace, there's a better chance that you're going to make decisions with the technology that are going to be good for society. Because we are moving to where the machines are helping us. The machines are also starting to make some decisions, but then we have to have oversight on that. Mm-hmm. All right, so the criticism that comes about from people sometimes is like, oh, this like the college is this liberal elite. That does not have to be the case, right? What has to be the case is that when people are at college, they're getting trained by people who have excellence in some field. And that's why when I teach my classes, I tell them I'm an atmospheric scientist. These are the things I'm going to give you. Mm-hmm. I'm a statistician. I'm going to give you that knowledge. The other things, if you want to discuss with me, we can just have a discussion. But I'm not telling you what to do. And I think that's true across colleges. And so this, there's been this leveled objection to the college professor that they're just feeding people information to indoctrinate them. That's so rare. Do a sample on all the data, and you'll find, no, most college professors are like me. They stick in their lane, and they try and train students to go off and do what they want to do.
You know, it's been a long time since I was in college, but I cover a lot of what goes on in colleges, and my wife runs a college scholarship foundation, and what you just said, I think, is so true, and it's so important to understand. You don't have overwhelmingly, you do not have professors indoctrinating students on political issues or that sort of thing. They're teaching critical information, you know, and and these kids have great minds to start with, and you guys expand what those great minds can achieve.
Right.
You know, so I think it's really important for people to understand that, because because something else is what's been in the water or in the air lately, like this bad stuff is going on at colleges and universities. That's not true. If we could go back to climate change for a moment. I've been pessimistic I've done a lot of journalistic work on climate change, but I'm the farthest thing from a climate scientist. But I've been pessimistic about the targets set in the effort to limit the destructive impact of climate change. And the basic goal was to keep the global warming, the increase in temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius above what it was at the beginning of the industrial age. And so my first question on this is, are we in danger of blowing through that important benchmark within the next few years?
The benchmark itself is interesting, right? Because that's a globally average temperature that no one feels. It was useful from the standpoint of physics of trying to reduce things down to limited information that links directly to hazards, right? But when we're talking about a tipping point, that idea of a tipping point really depends on which physics of the climate system you're interested in, right? So if your primary interest is, let's try and keep some sea ice in the Arctic even in summer, then we were probably going to pass that point. Probably there's not any way to not pass that point. Right. We can't have a single number that leads to a tipping point, but we do want to keep these numbers in the back of our mind because they help us in thinking about the fact that we, humans who evolved as part of the Earth, are now making direct impact on the Earth's trajectory in terms of what the entire system is doing. I think that the local hazards and how those are changing depends on whether you're thinking about rain or wind or heat. And the heat extremes, especially in areas in the tropics, are getting worse and are getting to the point where they could be dangerous for people who don't have access to shade, water, or air conditioning, right? And so if the question is, well, if we pass 1.5, are we making things more dangerous? Yes. But if the question is have we broken the Earth? No, right? And what are the things we're really after with this? And for those people who say, well, it's the fossil fuel use that's the problem, then the next question is okay, now is that related to a bigger lifestyle problem, or is that just related to what we're using for energy? And for someone else, that's a decision that needs to be made, and that could be made across an entire nation. Like, for instance, Norway has made the decision to use almost, or the majority of, electric cars. And so they're making a pivot. And each country can maybe have an idea of how to make a pivot. The problem is once you do this with local countries, is that then you're saying, well, this is a global phenomenon, so can we really solve it that way? Right. So that's why you had the Paris Accord and these conversations. It's a very difficult issue because certain people say, well, everybody else who is categorized as a developing country gets to continue using fossil fuels like this while we have to curtail it. Is that the best plan? But on the flip side of that, if we start using all of the alternative energies that we've kind of developed, then isn't it okay to keep some of the fossil fuels because we're going to need it later? I think we've proven that we can find new ways to extract some fossil fuels that we didn't think we have, but that's different from saying it's infinite, right? And so for me, it just feels like we don't want to plow through our reserves on these things and set aside any sort of alternative plan. I think the issue is climate change is this real thing that we can observe, but it is linked to energy use, and energy use is a really complicated issue.
Given what the administration's policies are on climate change and what's actually happening in terms of the climate. What do you expect to happen over the next several years? Are you disappointed in the progress or lack of progress, or are you still, or were you ever optimistic? What's your view, your overall view right now?
Yeah. So my view is that the parts of the economy, some of the parts of the economy has shifted, where the interest in sustainability and the interest in renewables has increased. Part of that was due to a subsidence of renewables, but we are also subsidizing fossil fuel extraction.
I know.
And so to say now that they're trying to balance the table by removing the subsidies is a little bit misinformed, or is hiding a bit of the truth. So I wish that any policy that removes subsidies on renewable would also remove subsidies on fossil fuels, right?
Gotcha.
I mean, if it's U.S. land where we're going to go do the drilling, then it's like, well, get that money back to get something out of that, not just for the company, but for the U.S.
Gotcha.
Seems like
it's
an easy
our
one.
land.
It seems like an easy one to me. It's like, okay, you want to go dig that stuff up and sell it? Great. We got to get some of that money for roads.
Yeah, there you go. We've run out of time, although I think this is a delightful conversation. Thank you so much again for coming in. We've been speaking with Professor James Jimmy Booth from City College. My name is Bob Herbert, and thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. CUNY TV now has an app. Downloading the CUNY TV app lets you join us anytime from anywhere.